that, when they are pure consciousness, that's the moment the brain literally can change in a matter of seconds, because now the operator is no longer immersed in matter. The operator now
Robot chicken. I think I did once somehow.
And so people can heal their inner child by doing.
Oh my god, I'm so tired.
By overcoming emotions. It requires a certain amount of consciousness, awareness. It requires a certain amount of metacognition or mindfulness to observe who they're being and begin to modify their behaviors and create new experiences and begin to overcome some of those emotions that keep them in the past. But in order to do it in a very
something is missing.
Over and over again, that people have to get beyond their body, their environment, time. That's when they all of a sudden consciously
Big.
And a person can have an instantaneous experience that changes them because they're now already in the operating system. And I'll show you some brain scans that will probably floor most of you, because these are not nuns, these are not Buddhist monks, these are not academics, these are not Kabbalists and rabbis. These are common people
in real life or on TV?
Doing the uncommon thing. And the amount of energy that we're capturing in the brain we've never seen in scientific experiment to date.
So let's make this a big one. So I'm trying to experiment what works. I want to make these but bigger. I don't think the texture on the other side will work. Ah, so annoying.
MS lupus percent change in one instant when the person literally connects that instant to the power of anger. And that's the moment why we're talking. And that's what's contagious. It doesn't always happen that way. A lot of times, we have to say, people who have done our work, have done the meditation for 3 years. Wanted that healing more than their social engagements. Wanted that healing more than their morning coffee. They wanted that more than anything else. They wanted to connect with the divine every single day, and they wanted to drink from the deeper well every day. I don't want breakfast. I don't want coffee. I don't want my cell phone. I don't want my internet. I want to be our opinion. We have a date. And I am going to commune with you. And I'm going to connect with you. Nothing else that matters more in this moment than that. And every day they overcame a little aspect of themselves. Surrender a piece of the limited self to join the greater self. And sure, it was hard. And sure, they had doubts. And sure, they were uncertain. And sure, they didn't feel like it certain days because they were facing a very serious condition. But every day they did it. And after a period of 3 years, they overcame that disease or that condition or whatever. You ask that person, what about that condition or disease? And they'll tell you, it was my greatest teacher. What about your father who was an alcoholic, who was abusive? That was my greatest lesson. Because what do you think about your father now? Do you have any charge? No. And I'd say, well, now you have wisdom. Because the memory without the emotional charge is wisdom.
The memory without the emotional charge is wisdom.
Or living by the same emotions, addicted to those emotions every day, how can the soul go on an adventure into the future if it is stuck emotionally in the past? So then positive thinking doesn't work if the person is literally anchored to the past emotionally. And so when people begin to open their hearts, Fred will talk about this and I'll talk about it, we've got an enormous amount of data to show how powerful you are. And how connected you are to the person on the other side of the room when you open your heart, how it affects that person. We can measure this. That you are bound in an invisible field beyond space and time. But not when you're feeling anxious, not when you're feeling angry, not when you're feeling frustrated, not when you're judgmental. You're not doing that. You're actually drawing from the field around your body and turning it into chemistry, and your field shrinks. But when you open your heart and you it's safe to open up, feel it around your body for 9 minutes wide.
I am really, really not talking today.
Now you're more energy, less
I
matter.
ran out of energy.
That non-local phenomenon begins to have an effect on everybody ever interact.
Let me recuperate.
So then, we know that when people begin to unmemorize those emotional states, lower the volume.
It's okay, as long as I'm doing my time.
The emotions are record in the past. When the person overcomes that emotion,
Okay, so that's what we're going to be making today. We tried these, it didn't work.
wow.
Chips are listening. Oh, I'm hungry. I'm always hungry.
Welcome back. I'm Michael Sanders, your host of Inspired. If you've
I
ever
see
wondered
these.
who you are and where we really came from, then do we have a Human by Design show for you. Today I'll be talking with Greg Brady, 5-time New York Times best-selling author, a pioneer in bridging science and spirituality, and the brilliant author behind a treasure of a new book, Human by Design. And that's just what I want to talk with you about today, about the new human story science behind who we are, where we came from, and even where we go from here. That plus we'll talk about heart trips to Egypt, recovery rooms in the Mayo Clinic, friends and old operating systems,
It's the woohoo guy,
and
okay.
ashes in Tibet, timeless living and Li Qin Yun, the importance of Shante Ishta, and what in the world calling mom on Sundays has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Greg. Are you ready to shine?
Hello, Michael. It's great to hear your voice, my brother. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you and our worldwide audience today. We've never done this before. I'm going to follow your lead, and my sense is our time is going to go by really fast. I think
Yes,
it will.
it is. So on that note, I had a bunch of backstory questions for you, but maybe you could bring us up to speed. What was your life like, first off, before age 10?
Before age 10,
Yeah.
I'll just be very honest with you. I come from a very dysfunctional alcoholic family. It was a very painful childhood, and tremendous poverty in the Midwest, in this big, beautiful country of ours. I lived, when my father left our home, my mother raised 2 boys, myself and younger brother, in very low-income housing with a lot of other people who were in very similar circumstances to where I am. And it was, it was at that time, actually, it was at that time that I was inspired to make the choices that led me to where I am right now. I looked into my world. This is the 1950s, 1960s, and I looked into my world, and I saw 2 places, Michael, where one individual had the power to shape the way the masses think and the way that people live their lives. So one of those places, you got to remember, man, this is in the 1960s. I'm looking at the background behind you right now, and I'm remembering the 1960s. So I would go to a rock concert. My very first rock concert, for example, was at that time called Jefferson Airplane, and then it became Jefferson Starship. And I saw those people on the stage moving 70,000 people, and I was in awe. But I also saw something very interesting. When those 70,000 people left, the ones that I knew, something was missing. They walked out of the hall, and the music was no longer playing. They could no longer feel the feeling that had been so powerful for them during the concert. They had to go and have the album at that time, or the 8-track tape, or whatever it was. So that was one experience. I also saw at that time, there was a man, and I'm not saying I subscribed necessarily to his philosophy, but he was a powerful speaker. His name was Billy Graham. And Billy Graham would speak to athletic stadiums full, also 70,000, 80,000 people. And he would say something to them, and it would change the way they thought about themselves and their relationship to the world. And when they left, they didn't have to have the album or the 8-track tape because something within them had shifted. And so I said to myself, whatever time I have in this world, I would like to contribute in whatever way I can. And I became a musician. I'm still a musician, and it's still an important part of my life. And I enjoy that, and I think music is important. And I believe that when we can share something of ourselves with the world that changes the way people think about themselves and their relationship, for their own bodies and for one another.
I wanted it to be more
That's where the real
translucent.
change begins. So my childhood contributed, I think, in a very
feel like it's
powerful
not
way
translucent enough.
to me embracing those two paths. And my adult life is the out picture and me exploring both of them. So, yeah.
How much was spirituality then? Or did you even have a definition of spirituality growing up?
You know, when we talk about spirituality, what I came to understand at a very early age is that spirituality predates religion. The spirituality is about relationships, about us and our relationship to our own bodies, to other people, to the earth, to the past.
He sounds very different than he usually
It's all about
does.
how we relate to our existence. The religion came along later, dominated by males, and wrapped the rules and the dogma around those pre-existing understandings, and in many cases actually led people to feel less connected to themselves and to one another, to feel separate from the world, and actually to begin to judge one another, because so many of the religious ideas were about one idea being superior to another, and if other people don't think that way, that we are to judge them in some way. So very early on, I learned to cut through the red tape of the religion. That wasn't what interested me. What interested me was the spiritual understandings that predate the religion, that go all the way back to the earliest civilizations that we now know existed on our planet. And that thinking and that work is reflected in some of my work. The most recent book, Human by Design, is all about the new science, peer-reviewed science. It's not new age, new thinking. It's not mysticism. It's not my theory. It's not my hypothesis. This is rock-solid peer-reviewed science that's overturning 150 years of scientific thinking when it comes to us, who we are, where we came from, on the one hand. And on the other hand, there is a reluctance, and in many cases, is a resistance to sharing these new discoveries in the mainstream, because there is a battle that is ensuing to hang on to an old story, a story that's 150 years old, that is obsolete, it's not supported by the evidence, it's not serving us in our lives, in our world today. On the one hand, the other hand, academia and mainstream media is fighting to hang on to this old story. So it's interesting to see how these two things are playing out right now.
I want to dive into that, and I have to say about your book, it's about time. Because if you actually step back and look at this, you'll see that the science, and I'm big into the science, and I'm a bridge as well, but it doesn't add up. I mean, the odds, for one thing, phenomenally against it. The second challenge is there's no evidence. There's these huge holes. But before we do that, give us just a tiny bit of background. What's your science background? And then let's dive right into the book.
Sure, yeah, I am a scientist, and I think science is good. Science does not have all the answers. I'm a geologist by degree, however, I have a strong background in life sciences. So in vertebrate biology, paleontology, microbiology, as well as chemistry, math, and computer science. So for me, it all works together to help to understand what those new discoveries are telling us. So I believe in science. I support the scientific method. And I'll tell you what's happened, Michael. In recent times, science has been hijacked. And it's been hijacked by competing interests. Corporations, politics, religion, all are hijacking science and cherry-picking data to make our world look in a particular way that supports their agenda. And my problem with that, our world is changing and our lives are changing, and how can we possibly be resilient to the changes? How can we possibly thrive in this new world if we're not honest with ourselves about the world? We're not honest with ourselves. We've asked science to tell us who we are. We've asked science to describe our relationship to the world, and science has done a very good job of doing that. And now there are people who are saying, oh, well, we don't like that answer, so we're going to go with a different answer. This is certainly true with climate change. It's certainly true with what's happening. I mean, beautiful example, North Korea and the United States right now. We're trying to solve our problems based upon principles of science that are obsolete. We were taught 150 years ago through the ideas and teachings of Charles Darwin. I'm just using this as an example, and how it plays out in the real world. We were taught that nature is based upon competition, conflict, struggle, and scarcity in the late 1800s. And that's important because our society, our economic model, the corporate model, they were all developed during that time. They're all based upon competition, conflict, separation, scarcity. They're breaking down now because they're no longer true. The best science in the modern world is telling us nature is based upon cooperation, not competition. Nature is based upon what is called mutual aid in biological circles. Now, it doesn't mean that competition doesn't exist. We all see it. But here's the thing. The more violence, the more competition, the more conflict we see in any population, whether it's humans or in Yellowstone National Park, the more of that we see, it tells us how far we've strayed from the truest nature of our existence. And if we want to successfully solve these problems, this is an invitation to go back and find a harmony with the natural laws rather than trying to impose these false assumptions upon what we think about ourselves in the natural world. So that's one example. Every problem we see in the world today, it's playing out in the global stage. Again, in the Middle East, North Africa, the United States, North Korea, whatever it is, it plays out in our homes, in our families, with our loved ones, our husbands, our wives, our partners, our spouses, our siblings, our kids. It's all based upon the way we answer the question, who am I? And for 150 years, we have been taught that we are
Hi Briar, how are you?
separate from
We're just
one
having
another,
a quiet
separate from the
stream
world.
because I'm
And
so
that
tired.
thinking leads to a fear.
No, I
And
don't
the
have
more we
energy to
fear,
talk.
the more we lash
How are you
out.
going?
And you're seeing this play out.
We got a new
on the
Twitch
global
panels.
stage,
I was
as well as
inspired
in our
by
society
you
with the
because
hate crime,
I
the
remember
hate
you were doing
of,
that
of religions that
for
are
another
different from
person.
ours, of
And I'm
the
like, yeah, I should
racial diversity,
revamp my Twitch
sexual
panel
diversity.
as well.
So this book is an opportunity. Once we redefine in truth who are we, the better we know ourselves, the less we fear. The less we fear the change in the new world, the less we fear one another. And until we can get to that point, Michael, anything we do to try to solve the problems in our lives, I think it's a Band-Aid.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
a
it.
well-intentioned Band-Aid, but it's a Band-Aid. So if we're gonna really get real about what's happening in the world, we've got to think about ourselves differently. And this book is an invitation to begin doing just that.
So let's go back from there. Let's go
What are you
back
doing?
150 years. Something that at the time was revolutionary.
I'm just
Actually, at the
making
time
lots of these.
quite disputed, but has taken on a life of its own that has made us feel small, powerless, insignificant. What's wrong with what Darwin discovered, and why hasn't it been replaced?
Sure. Well, I'm going to say a couple words about Charles Darwin.
I'm trying to
First of
make-
all, I have a lot of respect for
You're
Charles
drawing?
Darwin. Actually, I was doing a radio interview not long ago, and the interviewer
That's
did
cool.
not like the book. He didn't like the ideas in the book, and he had some problems with me. So the first thing he said, he goes, Greg, what gives you the right this book? He said, what qualifies you to write about evolution? He says, you're not a biologist. And I said, do you know what Charles Darwin, the man who, the theory, do you know what the interviewer didn't know? And I said, his background is in his mind. They're both geologists. And the guy went to a break. He went right to a break. When he came back with it, we didn't talk about it. So I have a lot of respect for Darwin. He's a scientist.
I was just going to say that his later works actually were very different. And at that point, they said, well, he's going nuts or something. But Charles Darwin
I
himself
really don't like the way it
was
comes out.
changing,
On
evolving
this
his
side.
ideas.
He was, and this is what I'm saying. He could not possibly have known in his day
Oh,
what we
annoying.
know today. I mean, hard to even think about it. 1859, cells in the human body were thought of as little sacks of fluid. The idea of DNA. They knew something.
The thing
was
is, if I
very
can't use the Mac,
they didn't know it. So it was okay if his theory was overturned. And I've read his personal letters and with other scientists.
means I have to use a lot of papers.
Modern academia won't let it go. Darwin said the first time it counters this theory, he said, my theory evolves, and a new one replaces it. So he was okay with that. It's the modern academic mainstream media that is claiming to a story that's no longer supported by the facts. So Charles Darwin...
You're drawing emotes.
Darwin did try to
For your
tell
channel?
how life began, and he wasn't concerned with how life began. His whole idea was about what happened after life began, how simple life became more complex, and eventually led to us. And it was what were our observations of some form of life in one part of the world in time that fit those circumstances. One saw to apply to all life everywhere throughout all time, including humans. And that's where I think Darwin went wrong. That generalization doesn't work. The physical evidence that links us to the primitive, all seen on the evolutionary family trees and National Geographic and the History Channel and Discovery and all that.
Oh, cool.
Those relationships, if you look at the evolutionary tree, where it shows modern humans at the top and the other forms of life below us, if you look closely, we are connected through crushed or broken lines. They're not solid lines. And what that means is there is no physical evidence to substantiate that connection. It is believed to exist. However, the physical evidence has yet to be found. And we've known that for years. So there's a big controversy. And if that's all there was, and just like Jurassic Park with science fiction, when that movie was made, where they took the DNA from the fossilized remains of dinosaurs and they built the genome based on the DNA. We are now doing that. We are pulling the DNA from the bone and marrow of beings that were believed to be our ancestors, and we build their genomes. And what we know is that they are not our ancestors. We are not their descendants. So, Neanderthal, for example. When I was in school back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I was taught that Neanderthal is our ancestry. We know that we did not descend from Neanderthal. We do have some Neanderthal DNA within some of us, more Europeans than North Americans, because we interbred with them. We shared the earth with them. And if we shared the earth with them, we could not have descended from them. And it's very clear from the DNA evidence now. But where it really becomes very controversial, Michael, is for our listeners who are familiar with Neanderthal. If you studied Neanderthal in school, then you probably studied another form of life. At that time, it was called Cro-Magnon, which is the new term is now called. The acronym is AMH, anatomically modern human. Self-explanatory. Anatomically modern humans showed up on the earth 200 years ago, not changed, save here. We are those anatomically modern humans. Our brain capacity, our DNA, our bone structure, it's the same it was 200,000 years ago. That's not Darwin's idea of evolution. And the DNA is showing us that
We are aliens! Surprise! When we die and we discover we were aliens.
Very precisely.
And you're like,
They happen in a way that we attributed evolution as we know evolution anyway. And they happen right at the same time, rather than slowly, gradually over a long period of time, which is the hallmark of evolution. So, for example, human chromosome 2 is the second largest chromosome, 8% of all of the DNA in our cells is made from human chromosome 2. There are genes that are responsible for the neocortex of our brain. It's the biggest part of our brain. The most recent part that gives us the uniquely human experiences of empathy, passion. No other form of life can wake up in the morning and say, in this moment, I choose to enhance my immune response. I choose to awaken my anti-aging enzymes. I choose to embrace deep intuition so that I can connect with my world.
I don't know why I feel like he's a
on demand. And that is all from
I'm usually pretty respectful of
that
people.
happened relatively 2,000 years ago. Chromosome 7 gave us the ability.
I feel like I have become really bitter. Really need to avoid people so that I don't speak bitterness.
I always wondered this. Chimpanzees, for example. We share over 98% of our DNA with the chimpanzee. And I mentioned earlier, I'm a musician, and as a musician, I always wonder, why can't a chimpanzee sing Stairway to Heaven? I mean, we're so close to them genetically, why can't they sing? And this is the reason.
We are aliens.
200,000 years ago, 75
I'm telling you,
years,
sir, with all due respect, we are aliens.
mutation never happened with them, and all of them studied.
200,000 years ago.
A genetic code gave us this ability for complex speech. It happened when we developed the neocortex. We don't know exactly what caused it, but we
Aliens came to Earth, mated with some humans, got really desperate, and then here we are.
After some of them were fused together,
That's how we
and the
came.
overlapping portions were either deleted or modified to streamline and stabilize.
Don't you know?
That is a sign
He
of
doesn't know.
intentionality. So the second part
Tell
of
him.
the first part of the book is science, where I'm sharing how this
Oh,
happened.
this is what I want to
in
make.
technical language.
There you
I'll
go.
text that to the back. But the second part of the book is
Finally.
now you know this.
After how many?
How do we awaken this extraordinary potential that appears to be, if we are here 200,000 years, and we've had this potential from the very beginning, it suggests that we're intended to this potential. So awaken it and apply it in our lives. How to do that?
Thank
So
you.
the second part of the book is my experience.
I want to dive into that. Before that, let's take on two of these details for a minute or two here. First
Sure.
off, let's talk about FOX2 and this fusing and going from 48 chromosome down to 46, because if we can really wrap
I
our
believe
minds
you.
around it, they thought
Just
when
joking.
the Human Genome Project was done, we'd end up with more DNA, with more chromosomes. Instead, we're going to less, and we're going to a higher level of sophistication, of complication, which odds are astronomically against this. What is FOX2?
Well, you could touch on three different things there. FOX2, human chromosome number 7, has a whole bunch of genes, and many of them are significant. In the book, I single out the FOXP2 gene because it is that FOXP2 gene that gives us this capacity for complex speech. We are genetically related to primates. There's no doubt about that. And what's so interesting is other primates, 75 million plus years, they have continued with no.
That's the aesthetic that I'm after.
All of a sudden, 200,000 years ago, there was a swath.
I know it doesn't look much different than this one,
in a very precise way.
but for some reason, it looks very different.
This ability for complex speech. If that happened in a vacuum, if that was the only thing that happened, I could have this conversation with you. I would say, that's evolution. Who knows? Maybe something in the environment, epigenetics, whatever, maybe triggered that. It's the fact that that happened at the same time that human chromosome 2 was being formed.
I feel like really useless.
Is
I watched Casey Neistat's video today.
Other pre-existing chromosomes.
And he basically, like,
after the fusion, it was tweaked in a very precise way.
ran full marathons in a week, or the distant equivalent to that.
If one of these happened all by itself, we could maybe attribute it to natural evolutionary causes. The fact that so many things happen simultaneously with such precision, and that we haven't changed since they happened. I think when you put that together with the fact that the physical evidence doesn't support Darwin's idea of evolution, it opens up the door to what is called forbidden territory in scientific thinking. Let me just say it like this. I'm going to invite our listeners to think about this, Michael. There's a huge difference between taking every iota of newly discovered evidence and attempting to force it into a pre-existing story, which is what's happening right now. There's a huge difference between that and allowing the new evidence to lead to whatever story it's going to tell us. So 150 years ago, Darwin put forth a theory. It was accepted in his time. It is the theory of evolution by natural selection. And we've all seen those evolutionary family trees. It looks like a big oak tree and modern humans at the top and all these other forms of, Neanderthal, Australopithecus, all these other forms of life are on the branches. There has been an attempt, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. Scientists have tried to force every new piece of information somehow to fit into that pre-existing tree, rather than allowing that new information to lead to whatever story it's going to tell. I don't know what that new story is going to be, but I know this: we have a new generation of young people in school right now who are ready to dedicate their lives, their entire life, to solving the mystery of human existence, and they're being forced to complete their search within the shackles of this pre-existing theory. And I'm saying, let's free our young people, let's free our scientists, let's let them follow the evidence and see what that story is going to be, because my sense is it's going to empower us to fear less as we become more aware of the potential within us. And as we fear less, we cooperate more. And I think that's what we need in the world today. You look at, I had an opportunity, it was, I wrote about this in the book a little bit. I had been 3 weeks in Peru. I was leading a group through Peru. I didn't watch television for 3 weeks. And I was on my way home, connecting from Lima, Peru, into the Dallas Fort Worth airport. And I was walking down the concourse to my gate, and every gate that I passed, they had a news feed, a television news feed from different stations.
Why am I bored? I don't know. I suddenly just feel very bored. Very bored.
I gotta tell you, it's a scary world. But what I was hearing about hate crimes based on sexual orientation, about cyberbullying. I was hearing about racial crimes. So of course everything about the United States, North Korea, nuclear threats, all those kinds of things. And by the time I got to my plane, I sat down and I was just thinking, as different as all of these things were that I was hearing, the common theme through all of them is that it all comes down to the way we answer the question, who am I? We solve our problems based upon the way we think of ourselves. Darwin's story has led us to believe that we are powerless, separate, and that we live in this dog-eat-dog world based upon competition and conflict. And every one of those things I've heard on the news was an outpicturing of that in some respect. Fear of the unknown, fear of things that are different. And as we embrace the deep truth that the new science is showing us, as we redefine who we are, we're not some random accident of creation. There appears to be some intentionality. Now, I don't know who or what. I'm not saying the book doesn't know. Science can only tell us what happened. Science cannot tell us why it happened. So science is telling us what happened to our DNA. Science cannot tell us whatever thinking was behind that. So what we know is that we're not this product of random mutations. And that changes the way we begin to think about ourselves. And when you look at the potential within us, the capabilities that come with being in these bodies that are not being developed right now, it changes everything. So I just wanted to say that. I think the book is interesting, but it's also, I think, life doesn't happen in a vacuum. And this book is released at a time when we are more polarized as individuals, families, communities, societies, nations than I've ever seen. I lived through the 1960s, and I thought it was bad then. And what I'm seeing now makes the 60s pale by comparison. So it's an invitation to embrace the deep truth of our existence, think about ourselves differently, and in that way empower us to work together in our world to become the best people we can be and create the best world possible. So I just want to say that as we're going through this today, I think it's important.
This is when art is a labor, becomes a physical labor kind of job. When you're like, oh, I have to fulfill this. That doesn't come out good, does it? It's not transparent. I need it to be transparent. I think, oh god, I feel like it's not working out right now.
That really, I think over the long run, changes heavy tear, changes the landscape of everything we know believes exists to be the worst, which is the
You know when you
little
feel
brain.
very
How do you put that
sluggish
quote?
and you
Something
feel
called
like nothing is working out? That's what I am
Well,
feeling right now.
this is in the second part of the book. And apparently it has been with us for 200,000 years. 1991, scientists made the discovery of the human heart. And when you think about the heart, this is actually pretty late in the game, in the cardiac game, to be making big discoveries. And we've been doing heart transplants, successfully, pretty successfully since 1960s. I think it was Christian Bernard was one of the first, and DeBakey, and the reason they are as successful as they are is because the thinking is that we pretty much understand what there is to understand about the heart. So for a discovery of this magnitude to come along so late in the game, I think surprised a lot of people. The discovery was made in 1991. It was published in 1994. Of approximately 40,000 specialized cells in every human heart, they're called sensory neurites. They are essentially brain-like cells that are not in the cranial brain. They're in the heart. They're concentrated in the heart in such a way. They're concentrated in a network, a neural network, and they are actually called the little brain in the heart. And I want our listeners to know this isn't a metaphor for what I'm saying here. This is literal. These cells, they think independently of the cranial brain. They remember independently of the cranial brain. They feel and they sense independently of the cranial brain. They respond to a very different kind of communication with the body than the cranial brain. And this is important for all of us because it means every emotionally significant experience we've ever had, every joy, every success, the most ecstatic times in our lives, every hurt, every betrayal, every violation of trust, is registered in two places in our bodies. And we rarely have problems with the good experiences. We don't say that we get stuck. We're hopelessly stuck in joy. That's a big driver for most people. But when we have experiences that hurt us, and we go through, talk therapy or whatever therapy we choose, often that therapy is about thinking, remembering, reliving, trying to understand and make sense of the experience, and that is pretty much a mental activity. And we can do that very successfully, but people say, I'm still feeling, the hurt. And one of the reasons may be because we have yet to, and there are exceptions to this.
Feel the pain. Feel the pain.
But we, in general, we don't acknowledge the memories that are held in the little brain in the heart, in the 40,000 sensory neurons.
Feel the pain.
So science began to find out about this through heart transplants. It's very common, maybe some of our listeners have even experienced this, for the recipient of a heart from another person, the actual transplant is successful, but the personality of the individual who receives the heart sometimes can begin to change. They can have cravings for foods, for example, they've never had in their lives, or a political interest that they've never had, or even sexual orientation is documented. Sexual orientation is changed once the person receives the new heart, and the changes reflect those of the person that have the heart before it was transplanted.
I need to.
So doctors have known that. Anecdotally, they talk about it. They say, I'm curious. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, look, there is a paint on my finger.
In the Midwest,
My middle
where a
finger.
young girl received a
Oh,
heart
I
from,
hurt
another
myself.
young girl.
That's a
who
watercolor
she
paint.
was.
But it looks like blood, doesn't it?
The dreams that she was having, which were actually memories carried by the heart of the young woman who had been killed, she was able to describe in detail to the forensic artist what the killer looked like.
No, it's
What
paint.
words
It's
he
paint.
used as he was taking the
I don't want to
young
get
girl's life.
banned for self-harming.
And that evidence was used to find.
Do people monitor do people monitor small streamers?
And is now serving time based on the evidence from the heart of the victim whose life he took.
I'm not even sure if I'm a streamer.
Another human, a little girl. So I use that. I'll talk about more detail in the book, but I use that as an example that is how real this memory is. It's not just a metaphor. It is a literal memory. However, it works through the language of emotion.
Of
more
course
than
not.
language of verbal, verbal description.
You make it as if
So,
like, duh,
that
darling.
40,000 cells in the human heart. The reason this is important is because we now know, of course, the heart and the brain are two separate organs. One of the common themes through our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions.
Are you streaming as
A lot
well?
of time with the yogis and the monks and the nuns and the abbots and the healers and the curanderos and the Yucatan, Tibet and Egypt and Peru and Bolivia and all through the American desert Southwest. One of the common themes in their very diverse practice is that they have learned to harmonize the heart and the brain. Two organs, but they harmonize them into a single.
How do I harmonize my heart and my brain?
And now we know why that's possible,
me!
because we're having heart neurons talk to brain neurons. And when we do that, when we are able to create this harmony, which is very easy to do, and I actually give the instructions in the book.
Well, can you share?
I don't know, I used to stream and be in someone else's stream as well.
Coherence for many of your biggest decisions. I'm trying to come up with a word. Heartaches versus brainstorming. I've been trying to think of this for years.
Yeah.
Because you're dropping down from what I'm going to call the little brain of the head and going into what I'm going to call the bigger brain of the heart to make your decisions.
They work together, and I want to be really clear with our audience. I mean, there's nothing wrong if you don't do this. What I'm saying is that we have a potential that has been with us for 200,000 years. It was with anatomically modern.
200,000 years. It sounds like a long time. 200,000 years. Every time he repeats that, I feel like 200,000 years. 200,000 years. 200,000 years.
To apply in our lives, and it is the ability, unique to humans, no other form of life, to harmonize the heart and the brain.
I was thinking, maybe I sabotage myself. Maybe I just don't want to be successful so that I can have a pity story to tell everyone. So that I would be loved. Because imagine if I'm successful with my personality, I feel like people that is unable to relate won't be able to relate anymore. I feel like maybe that's why I'm sabotaging myself, which is the stupidest thing ever, but like, you know, possibility is there.
This is where we awaken the anti-aging enzymes within every cell that actually heal the DNA. At first, they stop the deterioration. Secondly, they heal. And third, they actually begin to regenerate the DNA so that the DNA becomes younger. Biological aging markers actually reverse in the presence of being able to harmonize the heart and the brain. I've been with nuns who are 120 plus years old, and you would never know it to be with them. But they do this, all the time. It's the same process that enhances our immune response. I could not travel the world the way that I do with the schedule I do if my immune response did not support me in that. And I have practiced these techniques every day for over 20 years. I learned them about 22 years ago. And now they're taking on new meaning. But it's also through heart-brain harmony. Once we reach this level of coherence, I know a lot of our listeners use affirmation, for example. And affirmation is a communication with the subconscious to heal unhealthy patterns. However, they are only effective when we communicate with the subconscious in a language that the subconscious recognizes. So
this is probably more of my personality in real life right now. No talking.
It's a hotline with the subconscious. And it makes perfect sense to me, Michael, that we would have.
And then I get hyper. And then for about an hour, a week, and then I'll come back again. This is my default setting.
Deep intuition, harmonizing the heart and the brain, to access deep states of intuition on demand. Now, we all have intuition.
I feel like I'm dragging my feet right now.
You go to make a phone call, I pick up the phone, and the person you're going to call is already there, and that's spontaneous intuition. You say, well, that was cool. Can I do that again? And I guarantee you, if you consciously, mentally try to replicate that, it will never happen because you'll either pick up that phone too soon or too late. It is a subconscious connection, an intuitive connection allows us to do that. So how do we have those deep intuitive experiences when we choose to have them, when we most need them. And when we need to ask ourselves the questions that nobody else can answer, if we've got a medical diagnosis and we don't want to know what kind of treatment. Everybody, our friends going through this right now. Everybody they ask isn't a different answer. Their parents want them to be conservative because they want them to live. Their friends tell them to go holistic, and other friends tell them to go homeopathic, and their other friends tell them, to breathe this or drink that, and they say, now, what should I do? Well, nobody knows except you. And when you go into your own states of deep intuition, you open up this dialogue with your own body, and your body tells you what it is that it needs. And heart-brain harmony is the doorway to that dialogue. And for the scientists that are listening,
I need to start talking positively about my life.
It can be done intuitively, but it can
You
also
work
be
out.
measured.
It will work out. Things will get better.
Communication between the heart and the brain is a very low frequency. It's 0.1
I'll
hertz.
figure out the
Not
last,
even one.
the
0.1.
pieces of
So
the
you can't
puzzle.
hear 0.1 hertz. It's
It will
right
be
below that threshold.
cool.
And you can feel it, but you can't hear it. So when we create the emotions that send a 0.1 hertz signal from the heart to the brain,
I applied to this job at the university, and I could not forget. I could not believe that I still remember my student ID number. It's like this is like from 18 years ago. It's like from oh my god, I can't remember any of my other student number, but the first one I still remember to this very day. It's like insane.
I want to make the best use of the time we have left.
Yeah, but I want to talk about what was my biggest takeaway, which is probably unusual. You probably haven't had somebody say this before, this being the takeaway of the book. But I want to
I'm
talk
so
about
old.
it. To me, it was all important. You traveled to Tibet. You traveled up to 16,000 feet. You're meeting with different abbots. You're meeting with this I probably now pronounce it wrong, Geshe. And you're asking them, what is the force that binds together the entire universe, or the force that is the universe? And what you learned, to me, is the most powerful thing in the world.
Well, that's interesting. I was writing a book in 2007. It's actually similar to this book in the sense that it was the science to document something that we all sensed intuitively but had not been proven. The book was called The Divine Matrix, and it was the science of the field that connects all things. And as part of the research for that book, I was in Tibet. I led a group in the 1990s, early 2000s. Tibet was very accessible to me. That window now is closed. It's hard to get into the country now. But I met with an abbot of a monastery, and I asked him the question. I said, in your tradition, what is the force that connects all things? And it was all done through a translator. And he and the translator had a big conversation back and forth. And the reason was he didn't know what my orientation was or what I already knew, so that his answer would make sense to me. He was accustomed to working with his students who had come up through the ranks of the monks, and they had certain understandings. He didn't know what I knew. So he didn't know how to answer the question. And finally he came back and answered with a single word. I said, what is the force, in your tradition, what is the force that connects all things in the universe? And the answer was compassion. And so I asked him, I went back with another question, and I said, is compassion, are you telling me that compassion is a force of nature in the universe, or are you telling me that compassion is an experience that we have in our bodies? And he went back and forth with the translator again, and he came back with one answer, and his answer, one word, and the answer was yes. So he was telling me, yes, within our bodies, we have the ability to communicate with the force that holds this universe together. And it's through an experience that is the basis of their traditions and the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, and that is compassion. So, and it made perfect sense because, and again, these things don't happen in a vacuum. And then another book I had written about the teachings of the masters that were edited, in some cases deleted, from our modern spiritual traditions, including the Christian Bible. So as good as the Christian Bible is, and I use the Christian Bible because I'm in a primarily Western Christian world. What I'm saying is true in other traditions as well. It's true in the Hebrew traditions as well, for example. But we know in the 4th century, there were at least 43 books that were removed from the modern Christian Bible. And what was left was condensed and rearranged. We know that because those books have been recovered archaeologically. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt for the New Testament. And in those books that were edited, the masters, such as Jesus, and when I talk about Jesus, it's not as a religious man, but as a historical figure, as a teacher, as a master, actually shared the techniques with his students 2,000 years ago that parallel what science is now found in the laboratory. And it made the abbot's response to me make sense. Because when I asked the abbot, I said, when we see your prayers on the outside, what are you doing on the inside? He says, you've never seen our prayers because a prayer cannot be seen. He said, what you see on the outside, the bells, the bowls, the gongs, the chimes, the incense, the chanting, the mudras, the mantras, all that cool stuff, that we associate with Tibetan Buddhism. He said, when you see that, that is what
You guys are being very kind to be sitting in my stream.
And that is the message that was in those edited Christian texts.
Even if you guys are not paying attention, I'm still very,
If we saw that, we would know that the words are not the prayer. So when you say, our Father who art in heaven, or God is great, God is good, or now I lay me down to sleep, or whatever your prayer is, those words are not the prayer. Those words are the code designed to create the feeling in our body. The feeling is the prayer. And it all makes sense when you put all this information together because there is a force that responds to that 0.1 hertz within our bodies, and it's not limited to our bodies. It extends beyond our bodies as well. So this goes a long way when we begin talking about some of the healings. I talk about some of the other books, and I got to tell you, Michael, this is a very different way of thinking. I'm a geologist. I was raised in a very conservative community in northern Missouri in the 1950s and 60s, and nobody in my world thought about this kind of thing the way that we're talking about now on the one hand, and on the other hand, if we're honest with ourselves, this is what the discoveries are showing. And when we find ourselves in a world where the old teachings no longer serve us, I'm not going to say they're right, wrong, good or bad. They obviously worked. Well,
I don't know what we should do.
We're here today, so we have to say they worked. But it's time to let those go. Let them go.